Welcome to the Richmond Film Network podcast, your all-access pass to the world of independent cinema. Each week, we go beyond the credits and sit down with the creatives who turn vision into reality. Tune in weekly to find out who's on the RFN pod.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Richmond Film Network podcast. I'm Lisa Giles, your host, and with me today is DeAnna Day. DeAnna is a Virginia-based actor, intimacy coordinator, and aspiring screenwriter. She has acted for over 3 decades. She completed her intimacy coordinator training through IDC Professionals. As a young actor in New York City, she saw abuses of power and actors being pressured to just shut up and do whatever they were told. This led her to IC work and focusing on creating a more collaborative and people-first approach to filmmaking. DeAnna, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. It's so great to be here, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I think this topic is very necessary, number one, and I think it can provide people in film a more informative look at exactly what you do, what you can do for productions, and why it's so necessary. So first, for listeners who may be unfamiliar, what exactly does it mean to be an intimacy coordinator, and why do you think this role is so important in today's film sets?
So intimacy coordinators do several different things, but mainly they are advocates for actors and also sometimes advocates for crew members because when you're dealing with intimacy, sometimes there's intimacy that has violence. I mean, it can be things that can disturb people or trigger people. So they're trained intimacy coordinators. We have to train in mental health first aid. So that's one thing we do is be an advocate for everyone. And if anyone gets upset on the set, we can step in. A large part of what we do is talking with actors and directors and finding out the vision. What does the director want with the scene of intimacy? And then figuring out the actor boundaries and how those all can mesh together. Because you don't have to sacrifice the director's vision for the actor boundaries. There's always ways that you can shoot things differently and sometimes mask things with costumes. There's ways to work around that. We're advocates. We're also mediators between production directors and actors. And a large part of what we do is we choreograph those scenes. The film I worked with you, I'm sure we'll talk about that later, I didn't have tightly choreographed scenes. We worked in containers, which is a way of setting up a scene where the actors know everyone's boundaries and they kind of have that toolkit of areas that they can work with. So if actor A, for example, says, I'm comfortable anything from my head to my waist, with light touches, then that actor, their scene partner knows that that's what they work with. So choreography, it's either tightly set by the IC, the intimacy coordinator, or they set up the container in which the actors can work around and work with. So that's the main part. So choreography, advocacy, mental health, if needed, those are the key components. And sometimes we work also as maybe a cultural kind of component as well, because intimacy differs amongst different cultures. So if you want to be an intimacy coordinator, you have to have quite a diverse skill set. You have to know choreography. You have to sometimes know about different cultures. And every intimacy coordinator has a little bit of a specialty. My specialty and my interest is because I was a school teacher for many years. I like working with young people. So I've taken some extra classes on working with young actors and things of that nature. If you think about it, there's a lot of family scenes you see on television, right? There's a young actor sitting on his father's lap, his stage father's lap, right? Or hugging his mother, laying in bed with his mother, reading a bedtime story. Well, those are all things that, no, there's nothing explicit or anything what we consider sexual, but for the protection of the child and for the comfort of the actor playing the parent, you would want to have an intimacy coordinator to kind of set that up, stage it.
Yeah. DeAnna, you are talking about things that probably didn't even really think about would be considered work of an intimacy
Right.
coordinator. So especially the cultural piece, which the moment you said it, I said, well, of course, makes a lot of sense. Can you tell me about what the training process was like for you? Are there certain certifications that you get? Say you have a cultural competency certification and then a young people certification, or how does that work? If one were to want to pursue intimacy coordination training, what can they expect to go through?
Well, before you start a program, there's several SAG endorsed programs now. IDC is one of them, but there's several others. And before you even start your training, there's certain competencies they want you to do some self study on. Like they want you to get the mental health first aid, and that's usually something you can take online. A lot of times, different social service places have those programs, those classes you can take. So you have to take, there's some kind of prep classes that you have to take before you go into IC training. And that's one of them, the mental health first aid. As far as everything else, the training itself is several components. Like at the beginning of the training, like the first part of it, it's all about learning boundaries, like talking about boundaries, talking about movements and how those work with boundaries. For example, when we talk about what's okay to do, an actor's willing to do something, we don't just talk about where they can touch. You're also going to talk about, and the actors that I talked to on your set, we talked about this. Is it a light touch, a medium touch, pressure, and also duration of touch? So that's what a lot of the first module is. It's learning about boundaries and how that fits into film and how that fits into theater. And then the second part goes into choreography and things of that nature. It also talks a lot about the different roles people have on set, because intimacy coordinators come from different backgrounds. Like I know several actors that have gone into it, but I also know fight coordinators that have done it. And it seems like there's an influx of people now coming from the mental health fields that are wanting to do it. And so they don't really have any knowledge, Lisa, of who's the boom operator, what do they do. A lot of the program covers those basics of the different roles on a film set. That wasn't completely new to me because as an actor, I've been on film sets before, but that second part covers that. And then there's a lot of the training also covers, your business. How do you contact people to get these jobs? Things like that. So it is very extensive.
Very comprehensive. Yeah.
It is. And intimacy coordinators always have to keep their education going. There's always training that I'm trying to pick up. Like after I finished my program, I took a class on BDSM and kink. It was an online class because sometimes as an intimacy coordinator, you might do a project that deals with that. I also have been learning a lot about polyamory because we're seeing a lot more writing and a lot more that's becoming a little bit more mainstream now. But there's so many different things you have to know and be prepared for. And again, not every intimacy coordinator is going to have every specialty. And I think that's important too, that you have to have your network of people that you can talk to and consult with, because I might not know, I might get some project that I have to know a lot about, like Indian culture, and I might not know that, but I might have a friend or colleague that does. So it's very important that we keep our network going, and you might have to have a friend help you out or do some research with someone. But yes, it's very extensive.
I am loving this conversation so much already. I'm learning so much already just in this few minutes that we've been on here. Let's talk about Monday for our listeners. So DeAnna was on the set of Monday, short film that I just directed 6 days ago. And we had an intimacy scene that she was involved with. So this is the first time that DeAnna and I have worked together. Generally speaking, once you're on a set, and you know the actors who you're working with, and you meet the actors, what types of conversations do you have with them before blocking an intimacy scene? And maybe you're meeting an actor for the first time and you have to build trust with them pretty quickly. So how do you build trust, and what kind of conversations do you have with them when you first meet them?
Well, first of all, Lisa, the first conversation you have with the actor should never be when you first meet them on the set. A
Okay.
lot of what the intimacy coordinator does is in pre-production. So when I go to this now, of course, when I worked with you, it was a different situation, of course. But normally, and what would happen is I was have those actor calls. I would get the script, see what are we asking the actor to do? What's the context? What are we asking them to do? Then I would give them a call, either a video call or a phone call, and we discuss boundaries. I would specifically look at the scene. For example, if we'll say our actor is Kim and she's being asked to walk out of a shower. She was just a shower scene. And, sometimes scripts don't say a lot of details. It'll say character walks out of the shower, then puts a robe on. So I would need to ask her, what are her boundaries? This is asking you to walk out of the shower. What are you willing to show? Are you willing? And that's another thing. For any listeners or people watching this, if you want to be an intimacy coordinator, you can't be afraid to talk about things. You can't be afraid. You have to flat out ask someone, can you show your breast? Are you comfortable showing your buttocks? You have to be able to have those conversations. But that's the conversation I would have. What is it? Are you willing to show? What are you willing to do? If our actress Kim says, I'm fine with showing, my body in the back, my buttocks, back, fine, but I don't want anything on the front. Then I make note of that. We discuss any other elements in the scene. And then I would call the director, have a conversation with him or her, and say, this is what this actor's willing to do. What exactly is your goal in the scene? What is it you're wanting to show? And then I know how we kind of coordinate those things together. But it's very important that you have your conversations, your boundary conversations with your actors, and kind of get a little bit of a rapport before you step foot on set. And then that day when you meet them, of course, hopefully you have a little bit of time. Film sets can be very rushed, but hopefully you do have that time to, again, discuss the boundaries. Has anything changed? Reiterate what the director's asking them to do and go from there. And knowing the actor boundaries is very important, because a lot of times you would be, as the IC, would be expected to go on set with choreography already set up. So you already have to know what's the director want, what's the actor willing to do, so that you can start coming up with different sets of choreography.
So the trust piece, you had mentioned at the top that intimacy coordinators are often advocates for the actor. So it would seem to me that being in that position, that trust would be pretty easy to get to. But then again, we are talking about potentially showing
Right.
your body. And I like that you had said that, you have to be able to have those conversations. And I think speaking frankly with people and being upfront and professional about it, that probably helps. But the building trust piece, do you find that it is easy? Is it a challenge? And if it is a challenge, then how do you go about building that when you're trying to achieve a certain scene or vision that the director wants, and with balancing that with what the actor is comfortable with?
So I'm relatively early on with my career as an intimacy coordinator. The few projects I've done thus far, I haven't had a hard time establishing that trust, because the projects I've worked on, the actors were actually very excited and thankful they had an intimacy coordinator. So they were like happy to work with me and happy to be kind of upfront with me and kind of nurture that relationship. I find that a lot of younger actors are really excited about having an intimacy coordinator. And I find this with filmmakers as well. I am not super young. So I find that people within my generation and age group that have been around the block in this industry for a while are not as quick to trust an intimacy coordinator or want to use an intimacy coordinator. There's some people in the industry, some of my filmmaker friends included, that think, wow, I've worked 20, 30, 40 years without one. Why do I need one now? So at some point in my career, I'm sure I'm going to come up against that. And I might come up against actors that it's more challenging to build trust. I haven't had that so far. As far as how would I navigate that, I think just being upfront and communicating. I think that in general, actors, especially when dealing with these they can be awkward, scary scenes sometimes. I think the more upfront you are, you give them clear information, you answer any questions they have. I think by just clear communication and very specific communication, you would be able to build trust. I mean, I don't think anyone really wants surprises when it comes to things like that. I mean, that's why it was so tricky, like on the project we worked on, because it's not the typical project. You don't know anything ahead of time. But in general, I think people will trust an intimacy coordinator when they give specific information and when they listen. A lot of what we do is listen, right? Because it's so important to take those notes and listen to people about their boundaries. And I also listen about hesitancy. That's an important thing. And when someone asks me, what good attributes, what do you have to be an intimacy coordinator? Well, you need to listen and you need to read between the lines a little bit. Because if you're my actor and I'm saying, Lisa, are you okay with this scene? And you're kind of like, yes. If you're hesitant, that's not enthusiastic consent. What we want is enthusiastic consent. No hesitancy. Like, yes, I've thought it over. This is clear. It's very important for my character to do this scene or whatever. That's enthusiastic consent. If you're like, oh, okay, or anything like that, no, then the actor's not okay. Because sometimes every now and then you'll get an actor that still feels that pressure that's like, okay, if they have that, I'm taking that as a no and talking a little bit more about that with that actor before we proceed. So
good for you. Well, let's go ahead and transition into our project that we just worked on together. And for our listeners, to give you a little bit of backstory, the project was a 48-hour film project, which means, for those of you who are not aware of what that means, it's a film competition where the team of filmmakers write, shoot, and edit a short film in 48 hours, given a character, prop, line, and genre that they just learn minutes before the clock starts ticking. So this is what DeAnna and I did together, along with a bunch of other people. So we knew that we were going to do this project. We were committed to the project, but we didn't know the genre, and the script was not written. So we did not know what this scene was going to be, who was going to necessarily be doing it. We had a slate of actors that were selected. And again, not knowing the script, we don't know how many actors we need even. So we had a bunch of actors on call waiting for the script to be written, which didn't get written until 4 a.m. And so then right at 4 a.m., then we started plugging in the holes. Okay, well, this actor is okay with intimacy and so forth, and this one's not, so we can't put him in that role and so forth. So that's the puzzle piece that we were working with. And for the actors who, we thought were going to be in this scene, a couple of them ended up not being in the scene. And then at least one that we thought was going to be in the scene ended up not being okay, that we learned on the day with certain choreography and dynamics that we thought were going to happen. And so we had to, do a lot of pivoting on the day. So that's especially challenging for you, DeAnna, because thinking that you're going to work with this actor and then not, and then going into the space and seeing the space for the first time, what we have to work with. So there was so much change in pivoting on the day. Tell me what that was like for you.
Well, my main concern was the actor. So I was driving down the road before I got the script, and I had to pull over and I checked the email and I looked at it and I was like, okay, one scene of intimacy. and it's talking about clothes coming off. And I'm thinking, oh, I wonder how much. So I start thinking in my head about choreography and about containers. But my concern was the actors. I was ready to go on set and talk to them, see that everything was okay. And like you said, I did talk to one of the actors right after I read the script. And again, it's not really what she signed up or was within her parameters and her boundaries. So, okay. So that's why when I got on set, I said that. I reported that. Again, clear communication. You report to the first AD or the director, whoever you can. This isn't going to work. And so you did the pivoting. Normally this wouldn't happen though, because normally we would know ahead of time. But in our situation, pivoting had to happen. And it was really great though. You did allow me, when we figured out the actors we were working with, I had ample time to talk to them. It wasn't that we were rushed. It's like I was introduced to them. I really got to have conversations with them. And I thought that I was very thankful for that, because that was my main concern. Because traditionally, when we are talking about intimacy, and I want all the filmmakers, listen up to me, please. We want considered and informed consent. Considered and informed consent, according to SAG and good protocol. Even though when you work on independent films, I still go with the good protocol. You normally want with nudity. Well, for the nudity in the contract, you have to allow at least 48 hours for them to think about it and to okay it. And anything explicit, you should do the same. So considered and informed consent is usually 48 or more hours. Of course, with this project, we knew we weren't going to have that. So I got plenty of time to talk to the actors. And again, I'm looking for those cues. Are they okay? Are they just saying they're okay? But both of the actors that we worked with in this scene, I kept checking in with them and everything went smoothly. It worked out with their boundaries. They said, we're okay with this. We're not okay with this. Again, I mentioned at the top of this interview about the containers, and that's what we worked in for this scene. It wasn't that I showed them step by step what we were going to do. We discussed areas that they could work with. And then when you directed them, you worked within that. So it worked out very well for our project. But again, everyone, when you're working on a regular, not 48-hour project, but a regular general project, you're never going to just spring things on an actor. So normally that's not allowed in their contracts anyway. But, when you go into a project like this, all the actors that sign up for this know it's going to be a little bit, the parameters are going to be different than, a regular mainstream project, because you don't have the script ahead of time. It's being written the night before. So,
yeah. And I have to say, DeAnna, it was wonderful having you there. I felt, because we were pretty sure that we were going to have an intimacy scene.
Right.
We didn't know what it was going to be because we can't write it, the situation, but we were pretty sure that we were going to have an intimacy scene. And then right off the bat, I want to say you were the very first person that we got for crew, because we knew. Because we knew. Absolutely. No, because we knew that this was going to be a huge possibility. And so going in, before we talked to any of the actors, we said, okay, we've got to have an intimacy coordinator. When we go in talking to the actors, we want them to know we have an intimacy coordinator, because we wanted them to feel safe. We wanted them to know that we are thinking about their safety, about their level of comfort, about their boundaries, and that we respect that. And so I felt terrific about having you there and just watching you work. I loved watching you work, and you were right there beside me whenever we were talking about this scene. There you were. I felt like it worked really well. I felt like they felt protected. I felt like they were comfortable. I don't want to speak for them, but I think it showed in their performance, their level of comfort. And so just to thank you for the work that you did, and for being there, and for being so professional about it. And I could, when I saw you talking to them off to the side, I was like, oh, she's taking good care of them. I wasn't the least bit concerned about anything, because I just felt like they were in good hands.
They
So
seemed comfortable talking to
yeah.
me. They answered my
Mm-hmm.
questions. They asked me a couple questions. So, and as you were directing them and we were getting ready to do different takes, you saw me with the thumbs up. I had told them that's the signal that, tell me everything's okay. If you need like a timeout, you've got to tell me that, and we can discuss some things. And I never got the timeout. So they just rolled through. So I really enjoyed working with you. I think sometimes intimacy coordinators really have to try to read the director too, because some
Mm-hmm.
directors want you to be hands on, some want you to just kind of fade out in the background and trying to not get in the director's way. That's something that intimacy coordinators always have to kind of read. You have to read the room. You have to know, because there's going to be some sets that you're on there and you're working step by step with the actors at every moment, but there's going to be sometimes you're stepping back. You have to know when to get really involved and when to step back in the background, and I think that can be difficult at times, but that's why these conversations between the actors and the directors are so important.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I talk to the director, I'm not only listening to their vision, but I'm trying to learn like their style. Like, do they want to control every step by step thing? Or are they a little more hands off? I mean, everyone works differently. So I think trying to learn that and get kind of the feel of the director is important as well. I enjoyed working with you, and I want to give a little special shout out to Will, your producer, because when he found out that there was going to be some clothes being removed and everything, he came over to me before I went to him. Normally, any intimacy coordinator in that situation ask for a clothes set protocol.
Mm-hmm.
I've had it on my list. Go see Will, close set protocol. No, Will comes over to me before I did that and said, "Oh, do you want, we might want to cook." I'm like, "Yes, we do want to close the set. We want to have the essential people." And so I like that. He had that good instinct to do that without me asking him to do that. So that's important to do that. Normally, you don't want to have every PA or everybody in craft services walking around when things like that are happening.
That's right.
Just for the comfort level of the actor.
That's right. What do you wish more filmmakers understood about the value of intimacy coordinators? Because you had mentioned, the generational differences. The older directors might not be so keen to the idea versus the younger folks. So, what do you wish that more filmmakers understood about
Well,
intimacy coordinators?
I wish that they would stop and think that an intimacy coordinator can be a good partner for you as a filmmaker. They don't impede creativity. That's what some people, if you ask some of these older directors and people that have been around a long time, that's what they're afraid of. Oh, I don't want to get rid of spontaneity. I don't want to kill the creativity. But if done correctly and you have a good rapport with everyone, it's not like that at all. It actually can increase creativity, because if an actor feels listened to and they feel safe and they feel like someone's advocating for them, they're more likely to push the scene to a certain degree, right? Most people are going to feel more comfortable with nudity and something explicit if they know there's someone on set that can advocate for them if they do feel uncomfortable. So what I want filmmakers to know is that we're not there to squelch creativity. We're there to increase creativity, increase the collaborative nature of everything. And also, it can sometimes make the film set a bit more productive. Because if an actor's uncomfortable, what's going to happen if you have a love scene and actors are very uncomfortable? Do you think you have good chemistry then? You don't. It looks awkward. So if you have an intimacy coordinator that's worked with these actors, build up a rapport with them, helped them build up a rapport with each other, that scene's gonna flow quicker. You're not gonna have to do like 50 takes. But if you have uncomfortable actors of I don't know if my scene partner's okay with this, it's not productive. So you can have a more productive and creative set. A lot of filmmakers that are older, they're not looking at it from that lens. I'm hoping as people become more educated about the role, that they'll feel comfortable hiring them. I know that there are steps moving forward, and I don't know all the logistics because they haven't released it yet, but SAG is going to have intimacy coordinators as members now. And I know they're going to release more information in the future about that. My prediction, Lisa, is that within 5-10 years, mainstream sets that have these scenes of intimacy, it's going to be required. Now it's just kind of suggested or a good protocol, good practice. But at some point, I do think it's going to end up being a requirement. Of course, we work a lot in the independent sector. That's a little bit different. But still, it's good practice, especially if you have something really explicit. Like you noticed, you thought it helped the actors feel more comfortable.
For sure.
We're
For
an
sure.
asset. We're an asset.
Absolutely. And as an independent, I would never not have one. Did I say that right? I would never work without one, without an intimacy coordinator, if there were an intimacy on the set. I really valued you being there. It was necessary. I thought it did improve the level of comfort for the actors and even the level of comfort for the crew. I felt like it upped the level of production, just the feeling of professionalism with dealing with, the scene that we were shooting. And, when you have that, there's an immediate, you're setting the tone. This is how we're doing it. We care about the actors' boundaries. We're talking about boundaries. We're closing this set to, only the essential.
Set. That's what
exactly.
You're saying. You're saying this is a professional and respectful set.
Absolutely.
For everyone. And I'm glad you mentioned the crew, because sometimes they're overlooked by people when talking about intimacy coordinators, but it does help the crew, because it may be uncomfortable for the crew members we have these actors that are half undressed, and to help keep everything respectful and professional, it does help everyone. Like you said, the general attitude or the general vibe of the set, it can help.
Definitely. So, DeAnna, looking back at our film, were there any surprises or anything that made you particularly proud of the production, or just anything of note that you felt, particularly from the perspective of an IC?
I really loved, and I can't wait to see it on screen, but just watching it like over your shoulder on the monitor, I thought it turned out really well. I thought the actors seemed very natural, and I liked that they did have some chemistry. I thought that the scene turned out well. Yes, I was happy with that. So to me, there weren't any surprises. I felt like I was a little surprised when you asked me, when we were talking about maybe some varying stages of undress. But when asking them, I'm just up front, as I say, communication's key in this role. And I always tell actors, be blunt with me. You can't, some people are so polite and they want to do the job and they want to do it well. Actors, a lot of times, are people pleasers. And I told them, I'm not the one to people please. You want to be honest with me. And I think both of them were. They both told me, yes, we're fine. And they even said if anything came up that they would come to me. So yes, I felt like communication was good, and so I didn't feel like there were any surprises, and that's good considering what we were dealing with, a script at the last minute. But again, I felt like that communication, and the communication with me and you, I felt like I knew what you were asking them to do and what you wanted me to communicate to them. And that's key. That's when surprises happen. Usually when there's some miscommunication or someone's not being as upfront as they could be. So I felt like, even with the crew members, I felt like everyone communicated really well. So that there weren't really any surprises. But I do think the scene looked good. I was watching over your shoulder. I felt like it went well.
Well, I can't wait for you to see it, and I can't wait for our listeners to see it, which will be soon. And all the information about the rollout of the film will be coming soon. So you'll have to stay tuned and see what's coming up next. But DeAnna, thank you. I'm so grateful for your role on the set, and I highly recommend you and your services to anyone who has who has a kiss, who has a hand holding, who has an intimacy scene, please look
Or a
up
family
DeAnna.
scene. Or a family
Or a
scene.
family scene.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, that's something you don't even think about, but absolutely a family scene. When you said that, I'm like, well, of course, because a lot of times the child actors are not
Right.
the
Lots
child of the
yeah,
parents.
right.
Yeah. So absolutely needed on that situation. So tell our viewers how they can find you and learn more about your work and follow you and find you should they need you.
Well, I do have an IMDb page. You can look me up, DeAnna Day. That's DeAnna, last name Day, Day. And I am on Instagram fairly often. You can find me there. It's Miss DeAnna M Day, MsDeannamday. So you can find me there. So yes, happy to work on any projects upcoming. And I hope I get to collaborate with you again, Lisa, in the future at some point.
Whenever I have the opportunity. Absolutely. DeAnna, thank you so much again for being on the project. Thank you for taking time to talk to me a little bit. And to our listeners, stay tuned to learn more about the release of Monday. And we'll catch you on the next podcast.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Richmond Film Network podcast. Thanks to our guest and to you, our listeners, for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share. Tune in next week to see who's on the RFN pod. Until then, keep the cameras rolling.